next year. It's coming in 3 years. It's going to happen. The ancients said it comes through every 20,000 years in a different type of orbit that doesn't go in circles around the sun, but goes way out past the Kuiper Belt and comes in basically at an elliptical. And then I started reading deeper into this planet, and there it was, a 20,000-year deformed orbit going out into deep space, 10 times the size of the Earth. It is Planet X, folks. Isn't that just perfect that this would just show up while all this circus is going on? Now, I want to be clear about this. It fits the bill of Planet X. They're probably 50, 60, 100, 1,000, I don't know, Planet X's. They've already chronicled hundreds and hundreds of planetoids bigger than Pluto in the Kuiper Belt out past the former 9th planet, named after the god of the underworld. A fitting name. The Roman god of hell. So they said no more 9th planet because we got to say we have hundreds of planets if there's things bigger than it. Well, Pluto's little. This sucker is gigantor. Compared to Pluto. They're in the news today, meteorologists talking about how the moon being full during the blizzard is going to make it worse, and it does. It affects space winds, winds of space, the sun, and a lot more. Why the full moon could make this weekend's blizzard more destructive. Who knows what this planet is going to do coming closer in to the solar system? Because here's the deal. It's been way out there for however long, and now they've tracked its course and think it's every 20,000 years, right out of what the ancient Babylonians and the Mayans and all these other cultures said this big planet comes through and that there's earthquakes and volcanoes and all hell breaks loose, and it comes through every 20,000 years, and then now here it comes. Now, I don't know if this is the one, because there's so many of them out there. Who knows what's out there? We're too busy looking at Hillary Clinton and going, I'm voting for her because she's a woman. Who cares? What I'm getting at is we don't have time for racism and sexism and all this fighting and all this garbage and all this divide and conquer when we have genetic engineering going on, splicing and mutating every species on the planet like something out of H.G. Wells' The Island of Dr. Moreau, squared. Planet X, they discovered it. 10 times bigger than Earth, the size of Neptune, a gas giant, with a 20,000-year orbit, exactly what a bunch of the ancients said. They said it when it comes back through, it causes massive catastrophes, volcanoes, you name it. By the way, Kit gave me a whole stack of articles about record volcanoes. I laid it somewhere, I think in there by the coffee pot. But I'm going to have to actually get to that halfway into the hour with Michael Schneider from the Economic Collapse blog and get his take on it. And here's the deal, folks. I don't want to say I'm eating my hat on this, but I've been very, very critical of the perennial books that have been coming out since the mid-'90s about Planet X is coming. It's a gas giant, 20,000-year elliptical orbit. You know, the Babylonians talked about it, the Zoroasters, the Mayans. I never said that I didn't think that there aren't a whole bunch of planets out there. They've proven there's hundreds of them that are out in the Kuiper Belt past Pluto. That's why they delisted it, as I said earlier. What I was getting at is constantly saying it's coming next year and constantly saying it's the end of the world and the movie 2012, and then I get blamed for it. They would, I mean, so many news articles going, Alex Jones was the one that said we didn't go to the moon and that aliens run everything and that the Himalayas are going to be, you know, at sea level. Hey, Alex, 2012 didn't kill everybody. And so it just gets old. But it does show how the ancients were certainly right about big planets that come through, and there are big disasters, and there are big asteroids that hit the Earth, and there are big Earth changes, and the elite shouldn't be the focus of everything. They're all busy. I saw another headline last week going, Alex Jones says the elite want off-world colonies to escape Earth. I was quoting top elitist on their way to Davos saying that was going to be up for discussion. It was mainstream news. So even when there's mainstream news that, you know, Thiel and all these other folks and you know, the Tesla owner and all the rest of it are saying we need a Mars colony for the elite, I cover what they say, and then they go, Alex is crazy and made this up. So see, that's how they operate. They think you're stupid. But I tell you, uncanny that the ancients said 20,000 years, bigger than the Earth, and all the rest of it, and here it is. The question is, we're trying to look at its orbit. I mean, is it even scheduled? I guess it's coming in closer. That's what they're saying. That's how they're able to see it now. It's coming in from this orbit. What is it? They're saying many, many, many times further out from Pluto.
The catastrophes described in ancient sources were traumatic experiences common to all mankind. Purged from conscious memory, these records are now interpreted as allegories, metaphors, and the trauma has been submerged in the unconscious. Collective amnesia. A revolutionary theory of the universe based on the records of the past has challenged the fundamental beliefs of modern science for more than 2 decades. Today, the unexpected findings of space explorations have confirmed many of the predictions of this theory. Mountains were born and mountains collapsed. Land and sea changed places. Great streams of lava flowed. The sea boiled and evaporated. Such were the scenes of unimaginable violence during the times of global catastrophe, as recorded by the ancients.
Here in the New York Herald Tribune, Explosion in Science, the artist's conception of what happened when the heavens burst. What happened during the 1500 BC upheaval, which we read about in the Bible as the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt, and the phenomena or upheaval that accompanied that. And this is the artist's conception of what happened in Palestine and Mexico and China. Lightning, meteorites being rained down as the comet's head came closer to the Earth, followed by floods. Same in Mexico, where water swept over the entire land, great gigantic tides.
There were repeated changes in the Earth's orbit, in the lengths of day, the seasons, and the year. In these catastrophes, entire species of animals were annihilated. Others proliferated from wholesale mutations. Mankind was decimated. Civilizations destroyed.
One of the most interesting cases that are these mammoths that are frozen in the Yukon or in Alaska, frozen in the muck and the gravel of that area, that still have food in their mouths. The flesh has been preserved in the ice, so that actually when they were dug out, when they were digging for gold, they could actually feed the flesh of these animals to sledge dogs. Whatever happened happened suddenly, as for example the tilting of the axis of the Earth and freezing them right there where they were found. Why did the ancients worship stars or planets that the average person can't pick out of the sky today? And yet, all of our ancient heritage that comes to us in terms of architecture, writing, and so on, they're actually obsessed with the idea of worshiping these stars, these dreaded planets. All mankind through the years have worshipped stars that we can't even pick out of the sky today. Now why? Why were they so obsessed with them? Unless in some way these stars were threats to them, in some way impressed themselves upon ancient man.
A book like Old Testament is read maybe more than any other book through the centuries. It's translated to all languages. And you read there about sea and land changing places, about mountain moving into the sea, mountain being overturned, mountain melting like wax. And you think that this is metaphors.
So, Stephen, a lot of people will have difficulty with the idea that the buildings behind you are more than 10,000 or 11,000 years old. Can you please explain to us the great catastrophic event that most likely occurred about 12,000 years ago around the world?
Yes, and this actually, I first came across this in my studies of ancient cultures when I started studying prehistory. Like there's 250 peoples around the world that have a flood myth, that have a story of a great cataclysm. So when you have something that's consistent at that, it seems to be, besides I believe that all myths are based on a true event in actual time and space anyway, so that it seems to be a consistent idea of a cataclysm. Now, a lot of Egyptologists and local archaeologists in the area think it was a local event which became the Bible flood in Torah, the Old Testament. Something happened around 4000 BC in the Mediterranean. They think this is obvious, and then Santorini, 1400 BC. These are the events that's recorded. But what clearly seems to be is they're talking about a worldwide cataclysm, and these events were not. So I lean very strongly to the work of my good friend and author I highly recommend, Barbara Hand-Clough. When she was publisher of Bear & Company, she published a book in the late 90s called Cataclysm 9500 BC by two British scientists and authors, Allen and Dallaire. They postulated that there was a worldwide cataclysmic event happened around 11,500 years ago and presented massive amounts of scientific and geological, anthropological evidence. Barbara took that up, wrote a book on her own called Catastrophobia, dealing with the fact that there seems to be a collective trauma in modern human beings about catastrophe. She leaned heavily on the work of Immanuel Velikovsky, who wrote some classic books in the 50s called Ages in Collision, Worlds in Chaos, where he predicted that he actually said he thought Venus was involved, that there had been some cataclysm, and he was a Freudian psychoanalyst, so he claimed that it left a collective trauma in humanity. I think that's one of Barbara's great books. She republished it last year as Awakening the Planetary Mind, updating it with what we now call the Vela supernova, V-E-L-A, that a supernova occurred in space between the years 14,000 and 11,000 years ago, which may have greatly impacted our whole entire solar system. We know for a fact that Uranus is totally on its side. That is not natural. It is not upright. And our Earth has a tilt, wobble, which gives the precession of equinoxes the whole field of astrology. That's 23.5 degrees. Well, Allen and Dallaire are stating that this was a recent event, that something caused the Earth to actually break on its orbit, wobble, change the seasons, change the events. Again, I recommend people highly read these books. There's massive amount of evidence of that. I embraced this theory, and I looked all throughout the sites that I went with Hakim to see evidence of this. And every site that we went to, especially recorded in my first book, The Land of Osiris, the Boo Wizard sites, we see massive evidence of cataclysm, evidence of things happening. So what you're seeing behind me, we say these structures are built well over 12,000 years ago, but what we see behind us is evidence of that cataclysmic event. As has been said, all the casing stones are almost all off the middle pyramid behind us, which Hakim stated was the first pyramid. The original pyramid built on the Giza Plateau, it is on the highest point of the plateau, is the one directly behind me, and it still has its casing stones just at the top. We go to the Great Pyramid, all the casing stones are gone except just some on the north face, some on the west face. So what caused that? This has not obviously been queried. It is explained by the Egyptologists that the later groups came in, all the different cultures we talk about, particularly the Arab Muslim culture, attacked the pyramids. And while we know stones from the pyramid have been used for mosques, for other structures like the citadel of Salah ad-Din, But they didn't quarry these pyramids. As has been said by you yourself have said, they didn't climb up there with crowbars and evenly take off these stones. The cataclysm shook the whole grid line. We see at the site, the northern border, Abu Ruwash, that pyramid blew from the inside out. Has been quarried, yes, but the explosion, the cataclysm, is what's called that. We see massive evidence. We could go on here for hours talking about the evidence of an explosion inside the Great Pyramid. We are not the only ones, Chris Dunn and myself, to have mentioned this. Another author has mentioned, some Japanese mentioned it. It seems like something drastic happened inside the Great Pyramid. The walls of the King's Chamber are not it's normal rose granite. It is blackened. The box, the sonic resonance box that is in the King's Chamber, is blackened a darker color than its natural rose quartz granite. There's massive evidence of this cataclysm. Every site we go, every site, particularly the Blue Wizard sites here we have taken our group to, you see evidence of cataclysm. Massive boulders and stones thrown around, temples exploded out, not quarried. Quarried, if they were quarried, the stones are still there. If they were quarried, why didn't they take all the stones? Evidence at the Bent Pyramid, which shows that its corners blown off, but still has its casing stones on it. Explanation by Egyptologists, it was quarried. Sure, you attack the corners. It's the easiest part of a pyramid to quarry, but why did they not take the stones? The stones are still lying around. If quarried, they would have used the stone. Blown off. The weakest point of a pyramid is the corners. That's what blew off. Casing stone still on. Every site, massive evidence of this cataclysm. It is not a theory to me anymore. I accept it, that there was this massive event. There are different explanations. Dr. Robert Schoch believes it was severe solar events. We think the solar events were a byproduct of the Vela supernova. All added. Many different theories. All comes down to a massive worldwide cataclysmic event around this time period, 14,000 to 11,000 years ago. Impacted all the cultures. Perhaps as many as 80% of humanity might have been wiped out. The 20% that survived went back to a survival stage, rebuilt civilization, took thousands of years, but carried that collective trauma, which is recorded in the mythologies of all peoples. You listen to all Native American mythology, talks about a great event. The Mayan mythology, Aztec mythology, Olmec mythology, talks about a great event. And then what we have is the age where suddenly we become obsessed with calendars, predicting time, and obsession with equinoxes, solstices, and predicting eclipses. All the megalithic sites we see called post-cataclysmic, meaning less than 12,000 years ago, like Stonehenge, like Göbekli Tepe, all these great sites are all oriented to equinoxes, solstices, because it was predicted. They are not pre-cataclysmic. What we see behind us is pre-cataclysmic. It's not oriented to any star systems. We reject the idea of archaeoastronomy. Hakim said the only star alignment for the Great Pyramid was the pole star when it was built, and when it was designed. And he said the pole star was Polaris. Polaris is supposed to be becoming our pole star again. That would make it 2 precessions back, 26 times 2. That's how Hakim gave the cataclysm, basically ended the Giza power plant.
I'm Nancy Leader on the Zeta Report. When Planet X was in the night sky, inbound, early in 2003, it was visible as a smoldering brown dwarf with an immense tail of charged iron oxide dust. When approaching the Sun in 2003, Planet X could be seen when this immense dust cloud reflected sunlight back toward Earth, as in this series of photos from South Africa on November 2nd, 2003. Clearly a second source of light, this second sun astonished those who saw it during sunrise or sunset. No wonder the chemtrail planes were sent out to fog up the skies. If they don't want you knowing that Planet X is in the vicinity, they don't want you seeing this.
The second sun was visible in those days because sunlight could bounce off the immense cloud that shrouds Planet X. Then it moved closer to the sun and got lost in the sun's glare. But now it's outbound from the sun and moving slightly to the side so we can see it once again.
This is why the folks laying down chemtrails are frantic and have stepped up the pace. Is there any other recent evidence that the outbound Planet X can be seen near the Sun? On December 23, 2008, it was captured by LASCO, showing its long tail. And yes, this is a camera run by the U.S. government. And yes, this is close to the Sun, to the right of the Sun, coming at us in its retrograde orbit. On March 27, 2009, the SOHO cameras faintly captured the shrouded planet X near the Sun, this time with the legendary appearance of a winged globe. Not a month later, on April 19, 2009, the winged globe appeared again. Both SOHO images show the massive tail of Planet X drifting below. The winged globe of ancient drawings depicts the approaching Planet X, known as Nibiru in those days. And the second sun is back. On April 16, 2009, it was captured on a cell phone in Alberta, Canada. But the most dramatic evidence was collected on April 21, 2009, in Russia, above the Black Sea near the Russian Astronaut Training Center, near Moscow. The photographer took care to show us the differences between filtered and unfiltered shots. First, unfiltered, when the second sun is lost in the glare. Then filtered, when the second sun can be seen as an orb to the right of the sun. This is not a lens flare, as the small orb at the top of the screen is. Lens flares move about, and this to the right of the sun was not moving about. Later, the second sun moved behind a cloud, proving that this orb to the right of the sun was not a reflection on the window. A reflection would remain in front of the cloud, not behind it. And as the sun continued to set, along with the second sun, which is near the sun in our line of sight, from our view, the second sun dropped further behind the cloud. So check your sunset and sunrise views, as you too may catch a glimpse of the second sun. The Zetas state that the pole shift happens within an hour, forcing the Earth's crust to move 90 degrees as it drags along with the magnetic core of the Earth, which is desperately trying to align with Planet X, that bully magnetic planet passing overhead. When it's over, north will have become west, and the former poles will be on the equator. What happens during this hour? The Earth moves under her blanket of air and water. This causes hurricane-force winds worldwide and immense sloshing of the oceans. Tsunami on occasion assaults the coastline, but the tidal wave caused by the pole shift is larger, pushing further inland and rising higher than tsunami. For the Zetas, the general guideline is to be 100 miles in from the coastline and 200 feet above sea level. All coastlines are thus unsafe, but especially vulnerable are those cities on the water's edge, like New York City, Miami, LA, Hong Kong, Sydney, Osaka, Rio de Janeiro. Oh my, the list just goes on and on. River bottom lands are particularly vulnerable, even when inland. Hurricane winds bring torrential rain, with rivers backing up and unable to drain. Imagine your peaceful river valley flooded, as Burma was recently by a cyclone, taking weeks to drain. Okay, so water on the move is very scary, and being in a safe location definitely includes being on high ground. Anything else? Best to put yourself at least 100 miles away from any volcano likely to erupt. And per the Zetas, this includes any volcano active within the last 10,000 years. Volcanic ash certainly isn't healthy and can bury communities nearby. Heavy metals in the ash can poison drinking water, and the gloom makes gardening a near impossibility. Plan to be downwind from erupting volcanoes. And remember, the new prevailing westerlies will be blowing from what used to be north. When a volcano that had been asleep for over 9,000 years blew recently in Chile, the ash blew all the way across Argentina. Okay, so I'm off the coast and I'm on high ground, and I'm staying out of the wind drift from the volcanoes. Anything else? Some places have special vulnerability, such as flatland when tornadoes can form in the whipping wind. Tornadoes stay above ground and rise over the hills, so being in a valley between hills or in a storm shelter below ground helps. Some places are particularly vulnerable to ocean sloshing, such as the inland valley of California, which per the Zetas will flood and stay flooded for weeks. The water coming in from the Pacific during the hour of the shift will roll right over the coastal mountains and pool in the valley. When the ocean sloshing encounters flat land, such as the land in eastern Texas that goes on and on like a pancake, the tidal waves rolling in have no reason to stop. Per the Zetas, Texas will be flooded all the way to the highlands, leaving Dallas flooded for weeks. How do I know if I'm in one of those special locations that is particularly worrisome? Read the Safe Locations documentation. This is a link on the menu on the Zeta Talk website. The Zetas have given hundreds of advisements about locations worldwide, and this is compiled into a document there. For instance, idyllic Caribbean islands. Just where would you go when the hour of the pole shift arrived? Escape by boat? Per the Zetas, boats will be swamped in whirlpools, and even submarines will lose their bearings. This is, after all, a magnetic pole shift. Lots of compass confusion. For instance, in areas subject to mountain building, general guideline: if the rock in the mountains surrounding you is sharp, recently broken, you're probably in trouble. Rock and roll can result. But even in amongst the building mountains, there is land that is flat and smooth, unbroken, like the Salt Lake Flats, for instance. Well, why is this? Per the Zetas, this rock is too hard to shatter. Per the Zetas, even Arizona benefits from that, as it has hard rock that won't shatter. But some of these areas are in the heavy traffic lane. Mountain building doesn't just move up, it also pushes over. The Continental Divide in the U.S. is one such trouble spot, as mountains on the Continental Divide can tend to push overland for many miles. Per the Zetas, this is going to affect Colorado and Nebraska. Best to be in the eastern parts of those states and out of the heavy traffic lane. The recent spate of quakes in China was in land just to the east of the Great Himalayas, which push east at that point. Some 700 dams in the Sichuan province are in danger of breaking. Oh, and that's another thing. If you're down water from a dam, that is not a safe location during the pole shift. Got that checklist going? Coastlines, floodplains, volcanoes, mountain building, and, oh yes, earthquake. Well, of course, the whole world will be affected with magnitude 9 earthquakes, so being in buildings or in cities would be devastating. Buildings fall down. They bang into each other when they sway during an earthquake and fall down. Quakes break open gas lines, causing explosions and fire. Lots and lots of fire. For land not over solid rock, more than jolting can occur, as the buildings can jiggle themselves into the ground. This is termed liquefaction. Sounds a bit like camping. Until next.
The Sheriff's Department has been reporting that there's been some other quakes as well. I want to go to our guest to talk about this and to break down how he basically predicts these and what he thinks is causing it. Is it the pole moving? We know it's been moving at rapid rates and may even move faster. What's going on with Yellowstone? Is there really, because I've read this and talked to some folks that say it is there, that most U.S. Geological Survey seismologists are fully government funded. Or they work at a university that's government funded, and they've been told if you say anything alarming, which we saw a few years ago, about the Yellowstone could be getting ready to go, that you'll be fired or never see the light of day again. Stan, is that true, A? And then B, just give us what you think is most important first off.
Well, Alex, as far as what the muzzle is on the USGS, that has been a matter of public record, probably 5 years ago. But I have had a chance to talk to a couple of witnesses that were actually at Yellowstone, and when people were told, the geologist, to keep their mouth shut or they would be fined or imprisoned. And that was probably 2 years ago that I got the phone calls to tell me about that.
That's right. And the argument, don't they, that, well, this is government equipment, and so this is classified, even though it's not a classified agency.
Yeah, look, they even told the truck drivers that were bringing the equipment in, they weren't even USGS personnel. Don't you talk. They made them sign the little non-disclosure agreement, fine or imprisonment. And look, the data I got from one geologist there that actually is one of those that was told to be quiet and passed the information out through friends is this. They are monitoring all kinds of sites that they're not showing on the USGS earthquake plot for Yellowstone. And there is so much data being gathered out of Yellowstone by the government at the moment that they're having to use a supercomputer just to analyze the data from, second to second to try to forecast as best they can when there will be an event there. And whether it's a major eruption or whether it's a magma flow or a toxic gas release, all those are important to consider and to prepare for. But you know as well as I do, with the internet like it is, with the spread of news and rumors, a lot of the times without people fact-checking, that should a hint of this come from official sources, it could create panic and hurt the economy even farther. I don't know how much farther you can go.
Well, for those that don't know, the AP and others have reported USGS says earthquake hazard greater than previously thought. So, this is being admitted, but as you said, they then muzzled them.
Well, look, I've said this with you before, Alex. If we play the game where, say, you or I were in charge of the country and we wanted to protect the country and its people and the people from each other, if we were to come out and say the end of the world is coming tomorrow, we think, but we're not sure, then as an official announcement, people would panic. They would go out shooting each other, rioting, and that kind of stuff, looting. If we announced the possibility, not from the White House, but from unofficial leaks that occur across the country, then these leaks are picked up by people who watch the news and watch for behind-the-scenes colors, what's happening, and they spread it through the community slowly without causing panic. Now, I think you and I would do that to keep the infrastructure intact in case we're wrong, because, even with supercomputers, you can't really accurately forecast earthquakes and volcanoes to the minute, the day.
What's the best sign on the last three big eruptions? In fact, guys, you can search last Yellowstone super eruptions, and they go back over the thousands of years and the hundreds of thousands and millions of years, and it shows the areas. Usually it covers more than half the country and changes the climate for a long period of time. What are the estimates on what the eruption would be like this time, and how bad could it be?
Well, they've been revising their thoughts on it, that it might not be 600,000 years between eruptions. There might be a 1,000-year window and that sort of thing. So they're being very flexible between 1,000 and 600,000 years for the next one. But you all agree that we're in the zone now for another eruption statistically from Yellowstone.
And how many supervolcanoes are there on the Earth? Because it couldn't just be this one going off.
No, there's this one. There's another undersea one. I can't remember which ocean it's in, but the third one is in North Island, New Zealand, at Lake Taupo. And we've been watching that too. In fact, a number of people have. It's going to be so big that it's the Yellowstone of the Southern Hemisphere. I think the other one is in the Northern Hemisphere, under the sea somewhere. And
I think it's Iceland, isn't it? Yeah.
Iceland's certainly doing some wonderful things as far as magma and volcanoes. Iceland's actually raising up out of the seabed because the ice pack that covers the glaciers that cover the volcanoes there is melting. So Iceland is starting to rise up. and you can see more magma activity along that whole long fissure in the Atlantic Ridge that goes underneath Iceland.
Yeah, and they're blaming it on global warming when the volcanologists know it's because of the magma.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is, why is the northern pole region, why is that warming up and melting ice like rapidly in Greenland and Iceland, and yet the South Pole is gaining ice? Now, that's not a global phenomenon. It is the transfer of electricity in the Earth's system from the South Pole up to the North Pole, transferring the heat from the South Pole up to the North Pole, warming the North Pole there, but cooling.
And I've talked to astrophysicists who got multiple degrees, and they say that is indeed what's happening. And NASA admits the pole's starting to move. Is that connected?
Yes. In fact, NASA did release last year really high-resolution images of the magnetic fields inside the Earth, and they show in the northern hemisphere 2 North Poles and 2 South Poles down here underneath it. And that tells us that the North and South Pole is really 2 sets that are splitting and rotating at the moment. And this is a pole reversal, a magnetic pole reversal, and that is generating part of the climate changes we're seeing all over the world.
Now, expanding on that, I'm looking at your breakdowns, I'm looking at the USGS, I'm looking at the Japanese numbers. I'm just a layman, not an expert like you, but clearly, isn't volcanic activity and seismic activity exponentially increasing right now?
Well, it certainly is increasing. I haven't plotted to see whether it's exponential, but it's rapidly increasing. We get notices here, Holly and I, daily, by the hour from USGS. And over the last few weeks, we just noted lots and lots of earthquakes all over the planet, more than we would normally see. So, yes, it is rapidly increasing in numbers.
Now, I remember you were on about a year ago, and you said you thought there'd be more seismic activity in places that hadn't been. You talked about the fault line through Oklahoma and into Missouri and other areas. We don't have the staff or the crew to go back and pull that. I know it's on your site. You did say that. Why were you predicting this increased seismic activity? Because now it's happening right where you said it would, but also in New York and Illinois. I mean, what's going on?
Well, what I used to kind of guesstimate what would be happening rapidly is the fact that there were a lot of sinkholes all over the planet appearing. And these, to me, it fits in with my hypothesis that the Earth is expanding again. It has expanded before by as much as 25% of its old diameter. Now it's starting to stretch the surface and put increasing pressures on tectonic plates, particularly in the United States. And if you can, I don't know whether you can push a button where your producer can, but if you go to my website, to the show images page at the top row, right in the middle, we've got today's snap of the USGS plot of earthquakes in Oklahoma.
We'll put it up, standeo.com, DEYO, standeo.com. We'll put that on screen. Go ahead.
Okay, and so what it does is that in the middle row at the top, it shows the earthquakes today. Sorry about that.
It's okay.
That have come down from Oklahoma down through Dallas and down underneath San Antonio. And if you look at that image I've got there, it shows that there is some kind of a geological formation that the earthquakes seem to be following that line. And so then if you look at the next picture on the top row on the right, which is a geographic map of Texas, you'll see I've drawn a yellow line with a black outline showing where those earthquakes have been happening in Texas.
It's right down the fault line. That line goes right through Austin, Texas. In fact, I'm sitting right in the middle of it right now.
Yeah, and the thing is that whole area connects to an area over into the New Madrid fault line. If you go to the second row, first picture where it says New Madrid fault region, and go on there to... I'm just going to tell you which line to go to. 1, 2, 3. This one shows it the best, I think. Click on the third line, first picture, which has kind of a white line, diagonal line cutting through it. And it shows the shaded area on Texas right up into the New Madrid. It's all kind of connected in that weak part of of where the United States should have split when the continents were splitting, but it didn't quite do it. And New Madrid is a leftover of that. But I saw that if we keep stretching that it would create stresses along the edge of that plain, that coastal plain that goes up toward Dallas and Austin. And that's exactly what's happening. There is a safe zone, kind of a shield, if you wish, that if you I'm just trying to see if I've got that. I don't have that map up there at the moment, I don't think. But anyway, this shield is a line showing where earthquakes occur from the edge of Canada, on the west side, all the way to the east side, down into Oklahoma region. And that is called a shield. And inside that area, north of that area, there's not many earthquakes, but south, east, and west of that, toward the coastal regions, there is. And that's what I used to kind of forecast what I thought would be happening here in the United States.
While Earth's magnetic pole shift doesn't exactly make the mainstream news headlines, it's not exactly a state secret either. For more than a decade now, scientists have been publishing evidence that Earth's magnetic poles are in the process of reversing. In 2003, the public got a huge leap in learning as NASA published their foundation article on how Earth was changing in this way. They plotted every position of the North Magnetic Pole over the last 175 years, and we can see that the 1831 to 1904 pole migration during the first 73 years was fairly normal, but that it was followed by a much larger jump over just 68 years, and then jumped that same distance in only 29 years. The pole had been moving slowly for hundreds of years, seen in purple, pink, and red. But then the 1900s come along, and we go orange into yellow and green. The North Pole also notice that those are predictions rather than actual readings. And the past 3 updates to these databases have all predicted that slowdown incorrectly. So let's not allow that apparent slowdown to fool us this time. The poles are shifting faster and faster. Part of Earth's magnetic system is the magnetosphere, Earth's magnetic shield. As if the shifting poles were not enough, we notice a progressive weakening of our shield, similar to the pole shift. It's weakening faster and faster and faster. As of the year 2000 update, our field had lost 10% of the strength it enjoyed before the magnetic poles began to shift. And since then, we have noted further weakening, large breaches in Earth's magnetosphere, and then more weakening. In fact, as of late 2010 or early 2011, Earth's magnetism was down 15%. That is not exactly a great trend you want to see, and it continued with the 2015 data as well. As these poles continue advancing, the SWARM mission has taught us that the trend of magnetic field weakening is continuing as well. However, there is a weak spot as well. The South Atlantic anomaly, where the field protection drops to less than 20,000 nanotesla, and where the Van Allen radiation belts dip into the upper atmosphere during solar storms, and where the cosmic ray reading record was taken, is quite the thing. SWARM is already detecting single event upsets around the world, with the majority coming in areas where the magnetic field is weakest. Far fewer overtop the area where the strongest fields can be found. So not only are the magnetic poles shifting faster and faster, but Earth's magnetic field is fading faster and faster. You would think a magnetic reversal would occur with one pole going in one direction and the other pole moving around the opposite side of Earth, keeping the poles pretty much on opposite sides of the planet, but that is not what we have here. The North Pole is heading across the Arctic towards Siberia, while the South comes up from below Australia. Because the North Pole is moving faster, their meeting place appears to be below the equator, near the Indonesia Bend. This is also important because in February 2014 we posted the video called Disturbance Under the Ocean. The South Bali buoy, which was removed from public record the day after that video was made, was showing a dramatic seafloor rise of thousands of feet. indicating something was happening below our feet, and it happens to be where both poles are moving. Even more interestingly is the opposite side of the planet. The Earth can't have north and south poles in the same place, so if one shall remain at the South Bali buoy, the other one should pop out somewhere around here. I say somewhere because the magnetic poles are almost never exactly on opposite sides of the world, so it would be this general area over to the left, just between the Bermuda Triangle and the South Atlantic anomaly. Best guess for which one of those would get the pole is up to you, but the fact remains, our poles are shifting towards one another. Unfortunately, the end result of magnetic reversals is not such a happy tale for our planet. Our magnetic field protects us from the sun, which would strip our planet's atmosphere without the protection. Wei et al. Brilliantly correlated each of the previous great extinction events on Earth with these magnetic reversals. Because of the extra oxygen loss into near-Earth space, Earth is also at risk from major starwater events, like Noah's flood might have been. The starwater danger here is detailed in a video called Superflood. You can also research Arc Storm to learn more about the smaller version of the superflood. There is a new danger now, however, that was never present before. Way above our heads, we find electric layers, magnetic fields wrapping around our planet. We've been talking about them in this video. If we lose our shield, we are at risk for a danger that can happen much more quickly than an oxygen loss. The greatest danger that solar eruptions pose to Earth is electrical. The sun can surge so much energy into the Earth that transformers and grids could be destroyed. We could be without electricity for years. This footage comes from the video How to Watch the Sun. The short version of the story we tell there is that the sun can send us back to the Stone Age, and that weakening magnetic shield is what stops it from happening, and stops solar plasma from breaching Earth's protective layers and destroying the ozone and upper atmosphere. Extinction is certainly a possibility with magnetic reversals. Now, while many scientists admitted that a reversal was potentially underway, others have yet to reach that conclusion, and those who had always thought it would take hundreds or thousands of years to complete. But a few Berkeley scientists just blew that wide open. In case you couldn't tell from the pole movement speed and the speed of the field weakening, at these rates of change, we don't have hundreds or thousands of years left. The official word is that reversal can happen as quickly as 80 years, a human lifetime. We're already 100 years into this one. All those other video resources I mentioned throughout this video can be found right below. Just scroll down and click the links. Look, there's no sense in being afraid of any of these things. That won't help anyone. But you should ask yourself, are you willing to bet on the Earth stopping in its tracks and reversing this cycle? Or is this shift and the speed with which it is hastening something you wish to care about?
And we've been so blessed. People go, oh, that'll never happen here. I know folks that have been in some of these LA earthquakes that are a lot smaller, where highways collapse, hundreds die. I mean, folks, how many hundreds of thousands died in the tsunamis a decade ago or less, I guess 8-9 years ago? People, I mean, this is happening all over the world. We've been very blessed not to be hit by what's hit Pakistan and Iraq and Iran and all these other countries that just get devastated. I mean, I've seen numbers of hundreds of thousands getting killed in earthquakes in places like Pakistan.
You know, Alex, you chose the word blessed, and I do agree. It is by the blessing of our Creator, God, that we have been spared these things. But when we pull away from God, like we're doing now, due to the administration, you know, and all the changes they've made, we can expect these things to fall upon us like judgments. You know, it's the blessing is being removed, I'm sure.
You know, it is really true historically that when governments do really bad things, even the pagans believe that if the government got real bad, that they'd have earthquakes and volcanoes and all the rest of it. And the Bible says that, and people always poo-poo it. I just know that it's pretty interesting what's happening right now.
Well, let's watch what happens in the Middle East. We can segue from here to politics, because if the United States is heavily involved, which it is, in the partitioning, the dividing of Israel for a peace treaty between Palestine and Israel and the rest of the Arab nations. If it is divided, we can expect our country physically to be divided by earthquakes and damaging geological events like volcanoes, etc.
And you're saying because that's in Revelations or Daniel, or
No, I'm just saying we've observed that whenever we do something to hurt Israel, something of a measured response comes from God to our country, a proportionate response. So wait for it. When we hurt Israel, we're going to get hurt. And this administration, gosh, I tell you what, if you go to my show image page, second row down, right in the middle, I have a picture of Patrick Stewart, Captain Kirk, in the movie they made, Star Trek First Contact. And he's saying there, this far and no farther. They draw the line, and it's like in the Alamo. The line must be drawn here. We have got to stop this administration. Somehow, we must draw that line now. And I can't stress that enough.
Look, I didn't take these pictures. I'll say again, I did not take these pictures. These are all live feed pictures. And this is their capture of the day. They're not reflections. So everyone needs to have a real good look at this and say, this is what I was saying, everyone needs to concentrate on looking at the daily summaries. I look at them all the time just to see what's happening. Start getting used to looking at them because they show a lot. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4. Look at that one. It's got a massive great thing around it. 5. Count really 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 2 big ones here. Now, the 2 could be reflections of each other. I'll grant that. But one of them is real. So that leaves us with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that leaves one big planet with another orbiting planet around it, which makes 7. And I'm starting to think that this whole area behind this is actually a planet. That's how big this thing is. We're not going to see it. We're just going to see these. And we're going to see one of these. It's going to come past real close. All right, let me reduce it down so you can see the definition better. Well, no, what I'll do is I'll expand it up first and see how far we can go with it before it looks too bad. Where are they? There you go. So what do you all think? What's everybody think? Reprojected view. So these aren't altered or anything. These are their shots. This is their shots of the day. Reprojected view. I don't know about the time thing. But that's kind of weird, because that would mean that they captured these at night.